Hi, my name is Mick Ebeling, and I have beat the often path by committing and then figuring it out.
Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On this show, we showcase unusual success stories to help us see the bigger picture in our lives and careers and help us prove that you can make money without being a jerk and that you can be good to other people and still build a life of meaning and of wealth for yourself. Today, my guest is Mick Ebeling, a man who has been named one of Fortune's 50 greatest leaders, and his organization is the only one ever honored twice by Time magazine for Top Invention of the Year. Mick's incubator is called Not Impossible, and through it, he tackles enormous problems that affect us all, like food insecurity. Did you know that 50 million people are food insecure in the United States and counting? And through Mick's work, he's been able to distribute hundreds of thousands of meals with his innovative technology-based solutions. We'll learn how Mick transformed his career from film and film production into making a meaningful impact around the world. So here, folks, is Mick Ebeling, founder and CEO of Not Impossible Labs and Bento. Committing and then figuring it out, a lesson that we've heard multiple times from successful entrepreneurs. So what does that mean in your book?
I mean, for us at Not Impossible, most of the things that we tackle are humanitarian issues, social issues, issues that deal with access that people have to mobility or communication. One thing is common that typically whenever we embark on solving these things that we call absurdities, we don't have a clue what we're doing. And we certainly aren't entitled with degrees or diplomas or credentials to be able to pull them off. But we see these things and we just say, that's not right. The world shouldn't work that way. And then we jump on it. And we say it's about why this has to happen, not the how. And then so we just start our process and we just keep drilling and going and bringing in brilliant people and collaborating and getting to a point where we can finally create a solution to that absurdity and then getting that out to help as many people as possible.
Well, I love it. That's exactly why you're here, because that is basically the premise and message of this show to begin with. It's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to find a way to escape cynicism, which comes all too easy, especially these days. If you read things about pretty much anything to do with society at large or the environment or Earth, it's all doom and gloom. Almost every article in certain news sites that I read is, we're screwed over here, we're screwed over there. It's too late for this, it's too late for that. The problems are out of control. So you might say that a lot of the issues that we're facing seem impossible, don't they? How do we overcome those things? How do we not be cynical our whole lives?
Look, part of what we do at Not Impossible is we're obsessed and infatuated by this concept of impossible. We've been studying it for 10 years now, over a decade. And the one thing that always comes back is the fact that if you look, and this is based on, it's funny that a decade of research and study and obsession kind of distills down to this one point. If you look at everything that surrounds us, right? From the obvious, which is the fact that, you and I are talking over these crazy fiberglass lines that allow us to communicate in near real time. That's kind of the obvious. What's funny is that's obvious, but for most people, they don't even think about it anymore. That's just accepted, right? Or
it's just content.
How we travel. Yeah, exactly. How we travel in the air and cars, but go back even further. Go back to maybe how we slept last night. We didn't sleep on the ground. We slept on a bed. When we woke up today, we didn't, just go down to the river and cup our hands and get some water to put in. We opened up the fridge and grabbed some juice. Every single thing that surrounds us today that's possible at one point was impossible. Everything, every single thing. So for us, when you reflect on that, we say, all right, well, if everything that's possible today was impossible first, and this has been the way that our species, our entire world has existed, and that must be also the indication of how the world will continue to unfold, which means that everything that is impossible today is on that same trajectory of going from impossible to possible. The question is, when will it happen? Is it going to happen this week, this month, this year? Is it going to be in our lifetime, our kids' lifetime, future generations? That's kind of not the point. The point is it will eventually go from impossible to possible. So while we're here, this little amount of time that we're here on this planet, it's our job to do everything we can to make that transition. So when you open up your news feed and all you see is just crappy news about war and shootings and this and that and the other, for us, we take a step back and we say, okay, it is our job to do everything we can to make this world better, but it is also our job to reflect on the fact that we are here for just a moment, and everything that we see in the world that's going, crazy, that too shall pass, because that has passed for generations. The bad stuff is past, and we have to stay on this path of doing whatever we can to transition things from impossible to possible, to transition things to being from worse to better for other people on the planet. And so it sounds a little maybe ooga booga, like esoteric, but it's actually really simple. It's really, really simple. And it's also incredibly narcissistic for us to think that we, this generation, or us, or me, or you, have reached this point where we have discovered that one thing that shall remain impossible forever, right? That means we're the first person in the history of our species. That's a little narcissistic. So that's kind of our
whiteboard over here.
Sorry?
I have a whiteboard over here where I've disproven everything. I'm pretty sure that I am the first person to do that, just full disclosure. I can show it to you, but it's off camera right now, so I'm not going to put it on the screen. But just you have to take my word for it that I have found those things. But along those lines, you call yourself an impatient optimist, which perfectly sums it up. I'm not nearly cool enough to put that on my LinkedIn profile, but I believe it in your case. I like the idea of that, because optimism says we can solve these problems, but impatience says I'm not going to wait forever to do it. We do have a finite amount of time. So, yeah, what does it mean in your mind to be an impatient optimist?
The last 2 years, we have learned, kind of like Marvel's Avengers Endgame, right? That people, they just disappear on the planet based on this pandemic that has obsessed our minds and our globe for the last 2 years. If there's one thing that's done, is it's proven the fact that it's reinforced the fact that life is finite, right? It's for a brief moment of time we're here and then we're gone. So for us, we kind of see it as, all right, well, if we're only here for a minute, we're going to do everything we can to, one, have fun, to try to enjoy life, to try to make the world better for other people. And back to that point we just talked about, the role that we can play here in terms of how it's going to affect the planet's going to be just fine. The planet's going to be just fine. If we keep on the path that we're on with a lot of the things around global warming and things like that, we're the ones that are going to have a hard time. The planet's going to be just fine. The Earth will swallow us back up. We'll wait a couple thousand million years and it'll spit something back out again, and it'll keep going on. So for us, it kind of, with that, like, obviously being a bit grandiose in describing that, but so then we think, all right, for this brief moment of time, what can we do to enjoy this world and to just make it a little bit better for other people? It's about that human interaction for other people. So our optimism, I think, and this is a kind of a play on words here, it's more of a semantical conversation. How good do you feel when you do something good for someone else? How good do you feel when you actually are making someone else's life a little bit better? Pretty good. Great. So why don't you act in your own enlightened self-interest? Go ahead and just keep feeling good. Keep feeling good, making other people's lives better, making other people's worlds a little bit nicer, a little bit easier. That's where that optimism goes for us. At least that's how we manifest it.
Yep, completely agree. And obviously you must be familiar with George Carlin's famous bit that had a similar punchline: the Earth is fine, we're fucked, to borrow his language.
Totally.
And that is obviously the case.
Sorry.
Also semantics.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. My wife and I have this saying called Dottie Sophus, which is, don't take yourself so effing serious.
Yeah.
And I think that, well, that doesn't give you a license to be irresponsible and to, to kind of do whatever you want, whenever you want, to whomever you want. I think it gives you the license to be like, okay, why don't we just work on today, this week, this month, and think about how we can make the world better for the people that surround us, our family, our loved ones, and also the strangers that are going through hard times.
Completely agree. And I think the difference between our generation and, say, George Carlin's generation is that a lot of this a few decades ago was still kind of theoretical. He said, we're the ones who are screwed. And now we're kind of seeing how we're screwed. We're seeing, yeah, the planet is fine, but there's kind of a lot of plastic that's building up in the oceans. In fact, a ton of it. And it's also washing up on our beaches, and it's affecting our life. And we've got droughts and mega droughts, and we've got people who are starving and all of these things. So it's affecting us. Today is a beautiful day. You and I are both in one of the most beautiful climates in the world. I'm in Glendale, you're in LA, so we're doing fine. It's not chaos yet, but we're seeing the signs of some things.
Yeah.
It's not all perfect. And so the question is, what can we do to make it better along the lines of what you said? And I love that you chose food insecurity. That's been a primary focus of yours. And the project called Bento, Fixing with SMS messaging. How did you land, of all the problems in the world to solve, on food?
So at Not Impossible, we tackle absurdities. We tackle different things that we see and we become obsessed on. And then we drill down and figure out how we can prototype a solution and then try to scale it to as many people as possible. Perfect. Okay. So throughout the course of our existence, we'll see things and we'll go, rah, and we'll jump on them. We'll try to figure them out and try to get that to help people. So we've done that for ocular recognition technology. We've done it for 3D printed prosthetics. We've explored ways for vaccine distribution to the developing world. We've looked at ways to abate Parkinson's. We've done all kinds of different things. And those things happen randomly to us, right? All of a sudden something pops up and it's just like, wait a second. It's like having a rock in your shoe. Like, what is that? It just keeps bugging me. And so this concept of food insecurity, I never heard that word, food insecurity. I've heard of hunger. We all have heard the word hunger, but food insecurity was a word I wasn't familiar with because, as you just said, we're blessed. I don't know how you grew up, but I
had food growing up.
What?
I had food.
Yeah,
I grew up in the middle class.
Yeah, you didn't have to. You were never worried of whether or not you were going to eat. Maybe if you got sent to bed for getting in trouble and you couldn't eat dinner, but there was never a concern that your cupboards were going to be bare. So the definition of food insecurity, as I learned, is the fact that of 21 meals a week, maybe you've got 15 of them, 14 of them. So you've got enough to stay alive, but not enough to thrive as a human, not enough to be healthy, not enough to also constantly be stressed about where your next meal is coming from. Everyone, I don't know if you've ever, of course you have, but been hangry, right? Where you're just a nasty human being because you haven't eaten for whatever, 4, 5, 6 hours, right? Imagine living like that. Imagine if that was your existence. It's a whole different way of thinking. You can't think about very pragmatic, what you and I would consider to be very simple things like, I'm going to go get a job so I can make some money, or I need to go do this. I need to find a place to live. I need to get some clothes. All you're focused around is that one thing, which, by the way, is the absolute basic bottom tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we said, all right, this is, the more we learned about it, we're like, there's 50 million people in this country, in the US, who are food insecure. There's like one in five kids are food insecure, the number of veterans. It was just like all these statistics. And we were like, wow, hang on a second, we got to do something. So we went down, as I'm pointing that way, to a group down the street from us in Venice Beach called Safe Place for Youth. And we interviewed these kids who were homeless. And also, by the way, just so we're clear, there's about 650,000 people in this country who are homeless. There's 50 million people who are food insecure. And the people who are food insecure are the people who probably served you, at one of the local restaurants that you might have dined at, or they might have driven you, in a car, in an Uber, something like that. This is the invisible massive population that we can't really see. It's not the people who are camping in tents, although they are food insecure. It's not those people. It's the obvious side. So we said, all right, we started to interview people. And do you know what the one thing that came back in all of our research, the one thing that they wanted most? Ready? Drum roll, please.
All right.
Cell phone. They wanted a cell phone. And we were like, wait a second. If you are hungry, if you're homeless, why would a cell phone be the thing that you want? And the reason is that was that connective tissue to their community, to their family, to their friends. And it gave them an ability to exist in this world that is, almost ubiquitously connected through technology. So we said, all right, that's interesting. So we looked at the statistics, and 97% of the people in this country have a cell phone, whether you sleep on the street or sleep in a mansion in Beverly Hills. So we said, what if we were to use that? And part of what Not Impossible, we're all about design thinking, is we always talk about this concept of frictionless innovation. How do you cause the least amount, or how do you provoke the least amount of behavior change, but cause the most amount of difference, right? Most amount of impact with the least amount of behavior change. And so we said, well, what if we went through a cell phone, but we didn't go through things that required big data plans? What if we did it through text, because text was ubiquitous? So punchline is, that's what we did. We created this network that we went to large scale organizations, healthcare companies, the VA, massive CBOs, Boys and Girls Club, YMCAs. They already knew the people who were food insecure. We gave them what was called Hunger Not Impossible. It's now called Bento. We gave them this application. They poured the phone numbers into the application, and then everybody who was enrolled was able to text the word order. Then it would instantly, so it wasn't being things that were pushed to them. They would pull it when it was convenient for them. They would text the word order, then it would pop up restaurants that were geo-proximate to them. They would choose the restaurant that they wanted, which typically, if you're food insecure, you have to go wait in line someplace and hope that you get some food that you want to eat. Now they get to choose a restaurant. Then the next prompt is they get to choose a menu item from that restaurant. So now they don't get to choose Chipotle or Pret or a local cafe or something like that. Now they get to choose the menu item, and then they choose it, and then they get to go in and pick it up. And here's the key thing: when they go in and pick it up, they walk in and they usually the first time there's a little bit of intrepidation. They walk in and say, "Hi, my name is Mick," and they say, "Oh, yep, here you go, Mick. Here's your food," and you grab the food and you walk out. So the person's not identified as food insecure. They're not identified as someone who can't afford to feed their family. They're just Mick. So they get to walk in and walk out with their dignity and with a meal. And so that was really the concept of it. And man, I got to tell you, we were scared at first because we're like, all right, this is a crazy idea. Let's see if it'll work. Thing went bonkers. And the thing that we loved the most was all the feedback we were getting from people who were like, thank you so much for the meal, but thank you so much for just the dignity, and they would say it in different ways, but the dignity of just being able to go in and get food just like anybody else.
That gave me goosebumps. Seriously. I love that.
Thanks.
So beautiful. And at the time I did my research, something like 200,000 meals distributed this way. I'm sure it's more now. Is that accurate? Where do we stand right now?
It is. We're on a good clip right now. That was about at the 18-month point. Okay. And we also, this is kind of, because I'm really proud of what we've accomplished. It's kind of like, if you ask me if my kids are cute, of course I'm going to, oh, really? Let me show you all the pictures. Let me open my phone. Last year, we were named as a Fast Company world-changing idea. Fortune nominated us as a Fortune Impact 20 company. And then we received our second, and now we are the only Not Impossible as an incubator. Is the only company to have ever received it twice, but we got our second Time Magazine Top Invention of the Year. So, and that was all for Bento, which was really exciting.
And weren't you personally also named by Fortune one of the world's top 50 greatest leaders? And you were also unique in that. I think the accolades are just insane.
that was the other bald Mick from Venice Beach. That wasn't me.
Oh, the other one. Okay. Yeah, I know that guy.
Don't trust that guy. That guy's bad news.
He still owes me $5.
Yo, yeah, you're never going to get it. Never.
But the accolades are clearly insane. So let's rewind, because obviously what you have done is really cool. And let's stop and go back. So your origins were in filmmaking. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you end up getting from there to here?
On accident, probably like a lot of things. Probably like you got from wherever what you were doing to hosting your podcast. It was just something that one thing led to another, and our one thing that led to another is that my wife and I had a date night that was hijacked by a good friend of mine, and he ended up introducing us to this artist named Tony Tempt Kwan, who is right here on our wall. Look at that. And this is like cutting to a screenshot, except for it's a literal screenshot. Oh, look at that.
Whoa.
No reflection. That was really good. So we met
Super cool.
and he was a paralyzed graffiti artist who didn't have any way to communicate with his family. And so we ended up, this is the hyper condensed version, we ended up making this thing called the EyeWriter, which is a cheap pair of sunglasses and some coat hangers, some duct tape. Right here. It's some EyeWriter. So it's cheap sunglasses that we knocked the lenses out. It's a coat hanger that we duct taped along the side. Then we zip tied or taped a web camera to the front here so that someone could put it on like this. We wrote some code, and then this little camera would track the pupil, and that would move a cursor on the screen and allow him to draw again using only his eyes. So that was a hyper condensed version of it. But the whole point is we didn't know what we were doing. We just met this guy, and one thing led to another, and we ended up creating this thing. And lo and behold, it worked. He drew again, and then we all went home. And then we woke up, and this thing went bonkers, right? It was our first time magazine top invention. People started talking about it all over the world. And we realized, all right, well, maybe started to cause us to contemplate, maybe this is something we should do. Maybe using technology to help people is something that we should do. And my animation production company was going bonkers. It was great. We were crushing it at the time. But you know, when you wake up every day and you've just got that feeling that this happens to me all the time. I got that feeling that I forgot to do something. Imagine now having that feeling where you're like, wow, this is something I have to do. And so that eventually led to the creation of Not Impossible Labs.
So you're motivated. I love that. Do you think that in some weird way, obviously making film, they're huge undertakings that require a lot of staff, big project management skills. Do you think that the skills that you learned translated directly to being able to build other things?
100%. The job of a producer is to convene brilliant people who know more about fill in the blank than you do, but you bring them together and then you help to mobilize schedule and budget and deadlines so that you actually get to a final end goal. And that's what a producer does. And that's really what I did when I started Not Impossible Labs and what I do now.
Would you say that the good days outweigh the bad days more now that you've found a mission that you can really sink your teeth into versus what you were doing before?
Yeah. I think everyone's struggle is relative, and I think that I learned a lot about myself during the pandemic, that, depression is something that has affected my family's life. And I thought that I was immune to that. And I realized that, if I took a step back and I was thinking about how I was thinking, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I would have never, and no one on the outside would have ever suspected that those were some of the thoughts that were going through my head. So I think one of the things that I learned over the last 2 years is compassion, right? And I grew up in a fairly religious household. You would never know with my truck driver mouth, but there's a Bible verse that is judge lest you be judged, right? Which is, until you walk, walk 100 miles in someone else's moccasins or someone else's shoes, then you shouldn't judge them. And that's what I think I've really learned over this last little bit.
Yeah. And how do you feel now about these abstract problems, less abstract in places like LA, where the homeless population is so large and so ever present? How do you feel interacting with some of these communities now versus how you felt before when you maybe had limited interaction?
It's kind of what I mentioned a couple minutes ago. Everyone's just trying to figure out their life, right?
Yeah.
And in the absence of like extreme mental illness, in which case it kind of puts you spinning at a different level, and that has its own set of variables and obstacles. We're all just trying to figure stuff out. And I've learned a lot. We've had the blessing of working with the community that I think would typically be called and conventionally be called a disabled community. People who are blind, people who are deaf, people who are in wheelchairs, people who have particular stuff. Man, they just don't have the same abilities, but they are far from disabled. And that has been such a lesson in humility for me. And just kind of a little bit of a shaking on the shoulders of don't just be careful with how you quantify and see the world in black and white and confined lines, because it's never that clear. And I think one of the things that I've learned from this community and some of my, like one of my closest friends is he's a blind mountain climber. This guy could kick my ass up and down. The only thing I'm gonna like beat him in is anything that requires eyesight, right? Okay, that's one of thousands of things that could go on. And for me, I really love hanging out with him because it forces you to see the world in a different light. And notice I didn't say the word see intentionally, but I realized the pun there. You have to experience the world in a different way.
Yeah, that's such a good point. So it's really opened your eyes. Yeah, I love that. And if people have ideas, they have a general desire to do something good. Somebody out there, I think a lot of people have a general desire to contribute, but they don't know how. How would you say that somebody should think about it if they're trying to do good, but they're not getting that overnight, oh, I made this and suddenly I'm on Time magazine?
Yeah.
What if they're not seeing the change or the impact that they would like, or it's not going as fast? What if they are an impatient optimist, but the patience is wearing thin? What's your advice?
So we have a couple mantras that hang up around our hallowed halls of not impossible. One of them is commit and figure it out. The other one is help one, help many. And what that means for us is we can sit and talk about all of the problems in the world and talk about these massive issues and just how many people are affected by them. Do you know what we can do? We can go out and help one person. That's what we can do. And inevitably helping that one person or doing something for that one person, trying to make that other person's life better just a little bit, inevitably reveals something to us of, oh, that didn't work, or, oh, that did work, or, oh, wow, that could really work. And then it gives us the ammunition. It gives us the ability and the vantage point to see like, oh, how could I expand that? Or how could I stop? But the point is you at least have attempted that journey.
A scale of 1 to 10, how fulfilled do you think that you are on a daily basis? 10 is best life I can possibly imagine. 1 is, ugh, I hate everything.
I think there's 2 answers to that question. Sorry to take a simple binary question and make it on 2 levels. I think that I am incredibly blessed to have the life that I have, and I suffer from, and I say suffer from always wanting to do more and experience more and be more. So I would say the average is probably I'm at 11. You know, I'm a Spinal Tap 11 when it comes to kind of the blessing of my life, and I'm probably at a 7 in terms of how I feel like I'm doing everything that I can.
Because you feel like there's always something more that you could be doing. It's never enough.
Yeah, it's not so much that it's never enough, because that is a pretty dark place to be. It's the fact that there's always something that I could there's more that I could do, right? And that is sometimes a frustrating place to live, especially for the loved ones around you. But I'm also very clear with that's who I am, and that's it. That's Mick.
Yep, that sounds good. Is there something that you believe that goes against conventional wisdom, or something unusual that you believe that not a lot of other people might believe?
Goes against conventional wisdom. Yeah, I think it's really not that hard. It doesn't have to be that hard. I know it's big and broad in general, but I think that we spend a good majority of our lives just figuring out how to overcomplicate things, and it's just not that hard. It's not that complicated. So if we back to that whole commit and figure it out thing, we're going to get so much further if we just go for it and jump than if we spend so much time trying to figure stuff out and make sure that it's the perfect move, the perfect step. So I know that was probably more of an esoteric kind of vague answer, but I think that can be applied to almost everything. We're playing a lot in the healthcare space right now, and oh my goodness gracious, that they could overcomplicate a free lunch, right? It's just so. I think that's something that I'm very, very present with right now, about the fact it doesn't have to be this hard.
No, that's so true. And I think we've put a lot of mechanisms in place that do overcomplicate it. One of the last people I talked to is the founder of ampleharvest.org, and they're an organization that connects extra food. Let's say you have food in your garden.
Yeah.
Most people just throw it away or they can't even donate it, but how do we connect that with food shelters and people who are giving away food? And I asked him a question of how do we know if food is good or not or safe? And he says, you got two very great state-of-the-art ways to know, your nose and your mouth.
Yeah.
If it doesn't taste good and it doesn't smell good, it's not good. But sometimes we do overcomplicate it. We say, oh, the food has been unrefrigerated for 1 minute. Got to throw it all out. There's another 1,000 pounds of food in the trash.
Yeah.
Why? Why do we have to do that?
I think that the absurdities around that they're comical. It's almost like you watch. Oh,
it's bad.
It's bad. It's officially gone to bad. That yogurt or that sausage or that cheese that, past generations used to store in a basement, that's bad now because it's been a 1 day past and it's been in a refrigerated environment. So,
and yeah, the amount of food that must go to waste. How maddening is that? Because the statistic is 40% of all food, 50% of produce in this country. It just goes to waste.
And here's the thing that we operate back to that whole frictionless philosophy of not impossible. I think that if you just talk about the absurdity of waste, then you're going to go down paths that are frustrating. It's going to be very hard to solve. There's a lot of reasons. Why? Because there has to be some reason why someone has to change that behavior or change that way of existence, right? And so a lot of what we look to at Not Impossible is about what we call enlightened self-interest, or even more kind of defined as enlightened capitalism, right? Because what you just said is ridiculous. All this food goes to waste and it shouldn't go to waste, all things like that. What is the business interest for the private sector, for them not out of benevolence to donate it or to make sure that there's a thing because it's the right thing to do? And by the way, we should operate as humans that way. But if we can capitalize on the thing that actually incentivizes that business or that company or that person to do it, and we get a chance to feed people with food that was about to go for waste, that's the point to search for. Because now you've created motivations of why people want to do it beyond just be a good person. Being a good person is easy to walk away from and you don't think twice about it. Doing something that can actually benefit you, your job, your company, now you're actually incentivized to do something. So we're always looking at it from those angles. And we always joke that our sinister ulterior motive is to feed people or to give people more access to mobility or freedom of expression or da 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 da. But if you can create ways where other pockets of people or companies are actually benefiting, either fiscally or however, then from a communication standpoint, from a PR standpoint, now all of a sudden you've created more reasons for them to do that.
Yeah. Well, Enlightened Capitalism could have been a better title for the show. It certainly rolls off the tongue a bit better, but I completely agree. We've got to work within these mechanisms. We have to incentivize people. And for all too long, there have been this divergent path between capitalism pumping out plastic and trash and garbage and hippies not making money. And now we're at a point where we say, okay, what can we do to merge those two ideas? How can we have people enrich themselves, but also solving problems and not be incentivized to pollute, to ruin things, to harm our society? So I agree with your entire premise. I know we are very short on time. It has been a chaotic a day, but I'm glad I got in a few words with you. I really appreciate you taking the time to share. I did want to leave the floor to you so you can have a final word here. Anything and everything that you want to promote or say, last words in general, I would give it to you.
I appreciate that. No, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I would say if you're interested in Not Impossible, if you want to see what we're up to, you can go to notimpossible.com. A call to action would be, honestly, just go help one person. I would love, if you're listening to this right now, to go help one person and then to hit us up at Not Impossible, hit us up on the podcast and just tell us that what you did. Because if other people see that, maybe one act of kindness that you do or did can inspire someone else to do that. And we talked earlier about kind of the feeling that you get when you flip open your news feed and you see all the stuff that's going on in the world. Imagine what would happen if you flipped it open and all of a sudden you see that there's, tens and then hundreds and then thousands of people who just did one single act of kindness. Think about how that would affect the world. So that would be my ask. The everything that we do at Not Impossible, from our book to our podcast to the videos we produce to the partnerships that we do with corporations to kind of teach this, it all goes back to the same thing. Like, all of those things are manifestations and encouragements and invitations for you to just go do something good, small. Pick one person, go do something small to make their world and the world a better place.
What a great way to wrap it up. Mick Ebeling, the websites are gobento.com, GOBENTO.com, and notimpossible.com, spelled the way it sounds. Again, can't thank you enough. I just want to say one last time, I think you're doing some really, really cool stuff. And by the way, your websites and your aesthetic and all of that is so good. People check it out. Whoever your graphic designer is killing it. I love the look and feel of all the stuff you got going on. It's beautiful.
Thank you very much. I will give a shout out to the company called Verndale, who helped us do that. They've been an incredible partner. But thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
Yes.
And thanks for having me. And I will acknowledge to everyone, we had ridiculous technical difficulties at the beginning of this. So you were incredibly patient, and I thank you.
Not at all. I mean,
look, we can 3D print prosthetics, and we can make devices to help people draw with their eyes, but getting a Zoom call to work, that's a little... That's
the frustration. Woof. That's the frustration. It's like, why didn't it work perfectly the first time? Why couldn't it beam to space and over fiber optics? We still have to struggle. But again, thank you. And with that, I know you got to go. So the official podcast is over.